Welcome back. Uh, this is the first of a series of new episodes, a new series called Star Wars Saturdays uh, here on the Kolat Information Network. What we're going to be talking about today is the launch of the new trading card game by Fantasy Flight Games called Star Wars Unlimited. We're going to take a little trip to the past so that we can see the future. It is the future, you're saying? Huh? We're going to start off the original, the Star Wars customizable card game by Decipher. This game is the one that I cut my teeth with in the trading card game era. And you had to have two decks for this. You had to have a light side deck and a dark side deck, or rebels and Imperials, however you wanted to call it. But you were one side of the Force and they were the other. Cut and dry, but you had to have two decks. And you had to play your opponent, usually, um, uh, with both decks. So it was very interesting times. Um, the game was complicated, um, but it was very deep strategically. It had a lot of flavor. Uh, it's still in my top three favorite CCGs of all time. But this would be difficult to relaunch in today's age. You would have characters and vehicles fight on ground units, at ground locations across many different planets for control, and you could essentially, for each point that you lost a battle by, and if the or if you're the only person at a location, you could um, force the other player to lose so much life force. And basically, as the game went on, since when you lose life force, you either um, have to banish a card from your hand, your deck, um, until basically you didn't have any cards left. Um, you could also fight in space, from small snub fighters to large star destroyers. This sort of sets a precedent that most Star Wars games um, uses going forward, where you fight characters and vehicles on the ground versus characters on the ground and spaceships fighting in space. Um, but these fights felt very epic. A large build up to a big fight, and then let that determine the winner. Uh, Again, the difficulty level was much higher than most of the other games on this list, but still relevant for our discussion. After Decipher lost the license, um, the Wizards of the Coast got the license. Obviously, Hasbro's owned by Wizards of the Coast, and Lucas owned a huge portion of in Hasbro stock. So why not move it to them? So this game was fought across three different arenas. a space arena, a ground arena, and a character arena. Um, your job was to control two of these three locations. Um, and for the most part, um, attacking happened. Um, characters could only attack characters, ground units could attack ground units, and space units could attack space units. There were some abilities that let you cross over, but as a direct rule, it didn't. Now, uh, the I will say, I won't. The difficult part about this game was it used a lot of dice, d6s. Um, so when you attacked, power, when you tapped to attack, you would roll 4d6s. And if I recall correctly, I will say it's been a very long time since I played this one. This is your hit point. This is your. Let me see if I can see this. Now that's speed. Anyway, you had to roll a specific number to hit, and of course they had so many hit points before they're destroyed. Each of the frame colors, you'll notice there's purple for character units, green for ground units, and blue for space units. Basically told what arena they're in. And specifically, this character, you see Ion Cannon 2, you can attack a unit in the space arena instead of a unit in the ground arena. But here you only use its power is normally 7, but if you use this ability, it is 2. Its power is only 2 for resolving for dice rolling. Again, very interesting. I had actually used a mechanic from the BattleTech CCG, which allowed you to put units in sort of a storage mode where you're building your ships and your equipment, so that you can spend some resources during your turn, use all your resources during your turn, and then the next turn you could finish paying for it and bring it out. I think that's the only other time that Wizards used that mechanic, which I thought was very interesting. The next one that I played was the first entry by Fantasy Flight, the Star Wars the card game LCG. This one was interesting, but it was kind of divisive for some fans. So you had your deck was semi-predetermined. So these groups have numbered lots, and there's 6 cards in each lot. And you had, if you put the objective in your deck, then all the cards that were attached to this objective had to be played with it. So there was more deck building restrictions that made it harder to optimize. That being said, it was still an interesting game. This one produced 1 resources, and it had a damage capacity of 5. If it ever got 5 damage on it, it's destroyed. And if I remember correctly, again, it's probably it's been over a decade for me. Um, you either have to destroy 3 of your opponent's objectives, um, or if there was sort of a Death Star dial that ticked up, and if it ever reached 12, you basically got your rebel base destroyed. Um, the weird part about this game is there was no separation of ground and ground character units and space units. As such, it was sort of the first entry into the series that didn't sort of separate those, and it made things very interesting, weird. Um, had some very strange interactions. So the last of the entries that I played was Star Wars Destiny. I was very excited about this game, um, despite the fact that it had dice. Many of you know that there's few games that I enjoy playing that have a huge random element. Uh, Warlord is different because it's basically an RPG game with cards, so the dice make sense. Um, but this was such a different attempt. I thought it was very cool and very well done. Um, you started with a character or multiple characters in play to start the game. Um, they had point totals, and you basically had a maximum number of points that you could spend for a team. Each of the unique characters could be played with 1 or 2 dice. If you played it with 1 dice, it was cheaper cost. If you played it with 2 dice, it was more expensive. And obviously, the idea in this game was to knock out both of your opponent's characters, or all of your opponent's characters. And you would be bringing into play other weapons. You'd be playing strategies. I'll bring up Obi-Wan here. Some of them will have abilities like Obi-Wan's here. It had a very helpful guide, so you knew exactly what each side of the die that was supposed to come with him had. And then, of course, he cost 14 for 1 die and 19. It's hard to read that for a second die. So what happened with Destiny? There were 2 major issues. One was production. The cards were easy enough to produce. The issue was the dice. They only had 1 location that could print these dice. They're big. They're much bigger than regular D6s. They're about the same thickness as a they're bigger than a small D20. They're bright, they're colorful, they're beautiful. But ultimately, the problem with the dice production caused multiple set delays. Between that and some power level issues of certain cards and sets, inevitably, Fantasy Flight ended. It ended the LCG. It just wasn't as popular as I'd hoped, and Destiny, the combination of the 2 issues, the dice production and the power level issues, meant that they eventually cut it off. So what we're here today to talk about is Fantasy Flight Games' newest attempt at a Star Wars card game. Star Wars Unlimited is a collectible card game, which they haven't done since Destiny. Um, that two or more people can play, at least according to their rulebook, which I will link in the description. All the art is hand drawn. It has a unique art style, very classic, almost 80s. Kind of has that retro feel. And what they've seemed to have done is simplified a resource system, a combat system, while still holding on to the idea of epic conflicts and tough decisions, at least in the initial viewing of the rules and what few cards that we have. So the uniqueness of this game for any of the previous entries, with the exception of maybe the LCG, is they have sort of spheres of influence. Each of these represents an ideal that they can sort of group different characters and bases. And what this does is these determine what colors that you can put in your deck and play the easiest. Each of this, now what this does is instead of siloing you into you're building a Jedi deck, you're building a Sith deck, you're building an Imperial deck, you're building a Rebel deck, or you're building a Scum and Villainy deck, etc. Now you can kind of integrate more than just one ideology. Let's let's look at some of these. So this is one of the base cards. It's very generic. It's basically a location. All the bases that we've seen have 30 hit points, and the objective is to destroy your opponent's base. So excuse me. Again, very very simple. And you'll notice it has a specific sphere of influence. This one's cunning. Obviously, Cloud City. You'd think Lando Calrissian. This allows you to put cunning cards in your deck. I say that allows you, but there's a little more to that in the rule book. Basically, for each of the that are in your deck, if a card has a single cunning icon, then you would play it at its normal cost. If it has a cunning and a heroism icon, you have to have your leader would have to have heroism on it, or it's going to cost you an additional 2. It's that kind of it's sort of a tax, basically. The only other game, I take that back. There are 2 other games that have used that mechanic before. L5R, CCG used the mechanic that if you bought anyone that was not of your clan, you had to pay 2 extra to bring it into play. And BattleTech, the cards had a cost in the upper left-hand corner. but then they had additional costs based on if you had a specific resource out. And that's sort of where I cross these two bridges together. You're going to start the game with a base in play, and you're going to start the game, and you can see I don't have these in the correct order. And you're going to then you're going to start the game with your leader. So your leader is pretty much your build around card. Your leader will start horizontal underneath your base. And they have multiple icons. But you have the option of starting your leader and a base of a different sphere of influence, so that you can play cards with a single sphere for cost, or one of each for cost. But you also have the option of, and there are some cards from what we're told that have multiple sphere icons. Like they have two command icons. So you would have to have a base with a command icon and a leader with a command icon, or that card would cost you 2 additional. Again, it's very unique design. So she has an ability that you can use each turn on this side, but she has an epic action that can be used once per game. If you meet this requirement, you can change her or him into their leader unit. They go from a leader to a leader unit, and this goes on the field in the arena. That that it says, in this case, this Leia will be a ground unit, and when you use this ability, you get to ready her, or straighten, untap, whatever you want to call it, and she can be attacked, and she can attack as if she was a normal unit. When she is defeated, she will go back to being just a normal leader card, but she cannot change back into a unit for the rest of the game. So let's go over. There are character cards, there are upgrades, and then there are actions. The character cards will say at the top, they'll give what they are unit cards. They'll say what arena they go into, ground or space. They have a name and a sub-name or subtype. And there is some characters will have this little star icon, which means they are unique. You can only have one copy of this card into play. They also have their aspects, or I think aspect is the correct term. They have subtypes. She's both a rebel and an official. There is they have an attack in red on the left and a hit points on the right. Some characters will be blank, some will have game text. So when you play Leia Organa, Defiant Princess, you either get to ready a resource or exhaust a unit. That's some major flexibility. This is the Luke. This is from the starter deck. We were told that the starter deck will contain a Luke Skywalker leader as well as a Darth Vader. This is the action card. So they have a different orientation. This was designed intentionally so that you knew which card was which just by looking at the frame. Fairly self-explanatory. Cost, aspect, so villainy, name, subtypes, and then the game text of what you do. By the way, this card is dirty. When you have Imperial Walkers of some sort, AT-ATs or AT-STs, you're probably looking at something ugly. This is going to do some damage. You have space units. Nothing real spectacular here. 1 cost, 2 attack, 1 hit point. Some various traits, again, also in villainy. Here's your Darth Vader. So he's aggression and villainy. So you could play both the TIE Lin Fighter and the maximum firepower in his deck. But you couldn't, well, I say you couldn't. You could play the Leia Organa, but she goes from costing you 2 to costing you 6. He doesn't have either of these icons, and then you have to pay 2 additional for each. So she goes from 2 to 4 to 6 cost to play in a deck with Vader as your leader. So you can cross-lay to the dark side, it's just going to cost you more. Then we have upgrades. Once again, it tells if it's unique or not. Cost and the aspects that it falls under. The bonuses are down here at the bottom, along with the subtype line, where it's item, weapon, lightsaber. They've flavored this correctly. Attached to a non-vehicle unit. Thank you. That is checks all the boxes. This makes it easy for you to slide it under the bottom of the card, where you can see the visible numbers and the text box, and hide the art. I know that's sad, but in this case, the text box is the more relevant piece. +3 attack, +1 defense, and then an ability. If you attach it to Darth unit, you can do forward or ground unit. Oh, mwah. And here is another tactic, another event. I say tactic, and it keeps having tactic in that box, but it is an event. So all the numbers and aspects are on the left, so they're easy to find. The cost and the aspects, and then just based on orientation of the card, you can see the other important aspects. So let's talk about keywords. So there are a number of keywords in the game. I've passed a few of these. I'll go back and hit some of them. Restore. When this unit attacks, you get to heal that much from your base. It acts similar to Vigilance in Magic, or not Vigilance, Lifelink in Magic, where you gain life, etc. See if I can find the other ones, because I know they're farther back. Leia has on her unit here she has raid. So when this unit attacks, it gets a bonus +1/+0 while attacking. In this case, if she had raid 3, she'd get +3/+0 while attacking. Wing leader. So this one is, we got to see the tokens. I don't have a screenshot of the tokens, but when a character gets an experience token, the token they get is a +1 attack, +1 health token. So giving somebody 2 experience tokens gives them +2/+2. This is good value. See if I can find the other one. They're a sentinel. So if they are, whenever a sentinel character is in an arena, non-sentinel characters cannot attack non-sentinel units at that base. So typically you will declare an attack. You will tap, exhaust. I think exhaust is the keyword here. And you can declare an attack either against a character or directly at a base. With Sentinel, basically it says your opponent can attack anything except a character with Sentinel. They can't attack your base, and they can't attack a non-Sentinel unit. Basically, they're standing guard, and they're not going to let you pass until you destroy them. Then you can continue attacking other things as normal. So basically, if you get to attack a base directly, at the end of that combat, whatever your attack value is, you deal that much damage to the base. If you attacked a character, or a unit in this case, a vehicle, unit, trooper, whatever, each of you would deal damage to each other based on your attack value. If your health reaches 0, then you're destroyed, and you go to the discard pile. There are several other keywords in the rule book. Some very cool things. There's one very Chewbacca flavored one. I think it's called Grit. And so for every wound on that character, it gets +1/+0. So it's like, don't anger the Wookiee. Alright, so let's get to the last of these. So they have announced that the first set is called Spark of Rebellion. And the next 2 sets are Shadows of the Galaxy and Twilight of the Republic. Our understanding is that all 3 of these sets are to be released in 2024. And there are to be 3 sets per year. They have been designed to allow you to play both sealed and draft, as well as constructed formats. I will say this: despite my reservations about Fantasy Flight Games and some of the past problems, particularly that I have seen with other games and unfortunately my beloved Legend of the Five Rings. This game looks promising. We are watching very carefully here within the Black Sun Syndicate on Coruscant, and we're intrigued to know more. Hopefully, time will tell, and we'll be pleasantly surprised. I hope you've enjoyed this first episode of Star Wars Saturdays. Until next time, no matter the game, there is no escape from the